Welcome, everybody. I'm Craig McKenzie. I'm a director of Transcend and director of the recently inaugurated Institute for Team Coaching Excellence, which we haven't even announced yet, but this is recorded, and certainly we're also streaming it on Facebook. So we don't know where you are, and many of you might be live right now, and I'm not sure. So I've been involved in Transcend since it started. Certainly Tony and I founded this company together, though it had its origins within his mind and another organization before I joined. So this series is really about leadership and the challenges that we face. Today I'm hosting, and Tony, who has been scheduled to deliver a program, is going to join us hopefully in a very short period of time. So I will begin with a short presentation, and then Tony will join and we can begin to ask him questions. But we've selected a topic just to begin to walk through today a little bit with you, and we'll link it into the challenges that leaders face. And I know that at least one question has already arrived, but if you have questions on your mind, then feel free to ask those. And just put them in the chat is probably best. We're a quite small group right now, so we'll see what happens as we get more people in the near future. So what we wanted to really look at is, as we talk about the challenges of leadership, then we want to focus on this whole idea of our focus, our attention, and what we're aware of as a foundation for leadership in challenging times. So I'm going to just do a quick presentation of a model that we work with, and then begin to explore what kind of questions that might open up for you. So the first axis is between focused and distracted, and this will all build, it will make sense. This is about how we manage our attention more skillfully, and it's really about what are the components of it. So the next piece is that, this will make more sense as I add the pieces to it. So we can be focused or distracted, and we can be aware or on autopilot. So of course there's a range within those, that's why it's a continuum. So there's degrees of focus, degrees of distraction, and degrees of awareness, and degrees of being on autopilot. And what autopilot really means is just, you're not actually in control of your mind, that you're just reacting or doing stuff without being aware or focused on deciding. So this is really sometimes when we're just, our mind just takes over. Sometimes there are patterns that have been installed in our memory. But just to give you a sense of how this works, let me just lay it out for you. So if you're in this quadrant here, focused autopilot, people might describe you as being single-minded. Your results focused, and you might describe it as being in flow. So times that I feel like this is when I'm doing a particular task. For me, very often it's design. Very often it's coaching in many ways, where I'm doing something that I've done a lot, and I just absorb myself completely in the task. And I actually am just using all the skills that I've developed over the years, but I don't necessarily have to think about them all, because they're a little bit programmed into my system, let's say, and I'm just fully focused on something. So as a leader, sometimes this shows up in ways of we're single-minded focus on getting results, on the task, on solving a problem. So very often in a moment of time, a leader will interpret what's being said to them as a problem to be solved, and then shift into their autopilot focus on problem solving. And that may not always be the best approach. And that's why we look at this as an adaptive learning. In the bottom quadrant, we would describe this primarily as others might describe you as lost. So you're not really aware of much, you're not really focused on anything, you're kind of drifting, mindless, purposeless. And this could be useful for some people when they recharge. There's times in my life where I wanted to get to this state when I was extracting myself from a very busy and stressful role. I had a goal to not have any desire to do anything for a day, not feel like I had to do anything, and relax to that level where I was willing to drift. Being quite a purpose-driven person, that's hard. And then this bottom right quadrant is when we're distracted, so we're shifting our attention from thing to thing to thing to thing, and we're aware. So at an extreme, we would feel overwhelmed in this particular quadrant. We would feel like there's so many things coming at us from so many different ways. And as a leader, this very often is very stressful, very energy consuming, difficult way to live. And it's usually not sustainable. And people that go through burnout often have gone through this kind of cycle where there's just too many things. And this is a big challenge, especially as we think about adaptive leadership and the challenges of leadership in this time, is this whole idea of how do I manage all the stuff that's coming at me? How do I set priorities? How do I get control of my life? I'm aware of everything that's going on and everything that's needed, and I'm responding to things as they pop up, which is very distracted. And again, it's not sustainable and a healthy way to be. And ultimately, we're directing you toward this upper right quadrant where we're talking about focus, awareness, and that the ultimate sort of state, or the place where we're aiming for, is to spend more of our time in this mindful, leader-like, resilient, grounded, calm place. Doesn't mean we're not energetic. It doesn't mean we don't get stuff done, but we're getting it done not from a franticness, not from a driven, single-minded way, but from a, this is the most important thing. I need to bring this kind of energy to it, this kind of leadership, and be able to do that well. And when we're in that state, we're aware of the things we need to be aware of, and we're focused on the things we need to be focused on. So this is just an introduction to create a bit of a conversation. So what we'd say is the ultimate aim for us is to begin to move in these ways. And there's kind of two rules that we like to subscribe to. And certainly this is part of what our sister organization, the Potential Project, also uses a similar version of this. And rule number 2, make sure it's on the right thing. So what we say is when we're at our best as leaders in turbulent times and difficult times, is we're not letting the media, other people, panic or whatever, choose our agenda for us. We're choosing ourselves, what we focus on, and we're aware that it's the right thing. And leaders have the ability to bring the kind of attention and focus that they need to that kind of space. So with that kind of introduction laid out, I'll happily begin to answer some questions if you have them. And hopefully Tony will arrive before we end. I don't have a note from him yet. I need to just be distracted. Or wondering, I don't want to answer questions that he will answer later and have that be anything. But Victor has, what are the disadvantages of being in flow? So again, if you look at this matrix as, there's 2 continuum basically in there. So there's degrees of flow. So when someone's totally in flow, they're just head down, barging straight. Imagine if you're walking and you absolutely have to get from here to there. You're only thinking about yourself. You're only thinking about what you need to do. Your vision is narrowed. You're just looking. You're looking at people as obstacles. You're looking at traffic as an annoyance. And you're just really, really focused on getting to that particular space. So when we are in that kind of flow at work, then again, we may react to the people around us in a bad way. We may find in our career that we've had our ladder against the wrong wall, that we're climbing the wrong ladder, because we're so focused, we're not even looking around to notice that things have changed. And we might not notice that things have shifted. So organizational examples of this, where we're sort of ignoring trends, might go back to like BlackBerry, for example, as an organization that was focused on typewriter screen and was not really looking at and noticing the advent of the touch screen, and just didn't adapt fast enough. So they said, we do this and we do this well. So we need to, we just keep going with it. We have an edge, and we're not noticing other things. So there's definitely a cost challenge to that. And maybe to go back in time and think corporately about leadership, think of an organization like IBM, who was in the printing business and basically closed that part of its business down and shifted its entire operation in a completely different direction. And that would be an example of just being, I mean, not focused on just printing, but focused on what kind of company do we want to be and where's the future headed, aware of the changes and making strategic decisions from an open mind. Is that useful? So at this stage, we'd be happy to have, any questions, as we're focused on leadership and how do we work in terms of being a more skillful leader. And I believe Tony has arrived, and maybe you can just rename yourself, and I can certainly turn over the host feature to Tony. But what we've done, Tony, is walk through this attentional balance, and there's one question in the chat that I just answered around the disadvantages of being in flow. And then there's another question that I probably, maybe Mia can send to Tony as well. I notice it's private, that's there as well, that might be answered, but it's not necessarily related to what I've just presented. But Tony, just to just bring you up to date, I made it to this slide, and that's the last of the slides, and laid this foundation, and just inviting questions around how this might inspire questions about adaptive leadership. So happy to turn things over to you and let you carry on.
Yeah, all right, so oops, where am I? Good afternoon, everybody. Just trying to work out how many participants we have on the call. Not too many. So let's see what's coming up in the chat then. Hello. So is there an element of teams? So if you answered this one, Craig, which is the one that you didn't answer?
Well, this is a more complex question than that. There's the adaptive traits on leadership on account of the challenging times. How do we broadly explain actionable self-awareness, etc.? And then I would answer the team question maybe after you answered those questions.
All right, so let's look at how do we talk about, what is actionable self-awareness, and how do we explain that? And really the way that we would define, so everybody talks about self-awareness, and probably I'd say about 50% of people that I personally speak with would claim that they are self-aware. And they claim that they know what's going on, particularly in their emotional field of their experience. And we say that that's fine, but it may not be enough. So actionable self-awareness it goes much, much further. It includes things like, okay, I know what's going on in my mind, which is kind of component A of it. I know what's happening in the emotional field of my experience, which is, if you wish, component B of it. And I'm also able to remember. We call it self-remembering. It's a component of actionable self-awareness. It involves remembering what is skillful. So whilst I might know what's happening in my mind and I might be able to feel my emotions, that may not lead to me being able to remember what it is that I would like to bring my attention to in a particular moment. right? Which might be something simple like the task at hand, keeping my attention focused on that which I need to do in this moment. But it might be that I'm starting to notice that I'm getting frustrated or anxious or angry. And I've got these thoughts in my mind that correlate with that. And I've got various impulses that are beginning to show up in my body, which without actionable self-awareness might create actions, which may not be skillful. And then I'm able, with what we call actionable self-awareness, to remember maybe the way that I have committed to showing up. So maybe I'm working with a coach. I've made a commitment to myself and maybe to the coach around, when these things happen, this is how I would like to practice. This is what I want to practice with. Maybe bringing a certain value, maybe kindness or courage or something like that into the context. And being able to remember that and then redirect my attention to that. So that is what we mean by actionable self-awareness. It goes far beyond the traditional definition of self-awareness. So there's that. Now, self-management is really what comes from that, but it becomes effortless because it's once we have remembered our previous commitments to ourselves, and at the same time remembered all of the various stories that might be running our mind that might prevent us from moving in the direction that we would like to move into. All we have to do is remember how important our commitment is. Remember that the stories that are preventing us from acting in service of who we would like to be in that moment are probably fake news, internal fake news, which stands in our definition for false appearances to the mind, keeping us entangled. We're keeping us entangled in our old reactive patterns of thinking, feeling, and then doing. So we're able to manage. It's hardly self-management at all, because once we are able to remember what is important to us and why, then the conscious adjustment is almost automatic, if that makes sense. Now, sometimes you need to fake it till you make it, which means that, maybe you haven't fully embodied these values that you would like to bring into a particular context, but that if you roll your eyes or interrupt people, you're going to get yourself into trouble. And just simply remembering that if you do what you always did, you will get what you always got. And kind of just sitting on the emotion, and if you were suppressing it, not useful in the context of actionable self-awareness. Maybe that self-management strategy could be useful in terms of keeping you out of trouble until you have actually inculcated or embodied the way that you'd like to be, which really comes through practice. Yeah, so Anjan, is Anjan still here? Actually, don't see him on the list.
Yeah. Sorry, he asked it in another forum.
Okay.
Maybe I'll jump in and answer the team question, and then we'll see if there's any more questions coming in.
Yeah.
Will that be good? Awesome. So this idea of actionable self-awareness, self-management, and self-transformation, we talk about, is there an element of teams in the above model because it only talks about self? Well, teams are made up of individuals, and the individuals, of course, are developing awareness. Individual self-awareness is a key part of it. In our work with team coaching, we would work on the area of cultivating these three qualities within the team members, and then also beginning to help the team develop a level of team awareness, and then, of course, the team skills to manage itself, and then the ability to transform the team. An ultimate end of a very skillful team coaching engagement would be that the team would be a self-transforming team as much as possible, though often there's a bit of a journey to get there. So team is a context where self-awareness, self-management, and self-transformation can take place in the realm of the individuals on the team, the leader of the team, and then potentially the team itself. But that's a bit of a journey and a bit of a maybe a bit of a divergent way. So that's my response. Thanks, Tony.
I wonder if I might just add something there, which really brings it right back down to if you wish, the fundamental of it. That if actionable self-awareness and incorporates this thing called self-remembering. And depending upon an individual's role, that self-remembering might mean that part of, if you wish, their developmental goals might be about what it is that they need to do in order to bring themselves to be at their best moment by moment, right? So, and part of that might be to become aware of how they may be impacting on the state of consciousness of other people in their team. You know, we often say that a company is like a corporate alphabet soup, like an emotional alphabet soup, where the leader is kind of imparting the strongest of all of the flavors. It is incumbent upon all of us, you know, in leadership, of course, and the topic of this conversation is leadership. So it's incumbent upon all leaders to be aware that in service of being at their best, their job is to behave in such a way so as others around them in their teams can also be at their best. So it means such things as remembering to help to beat the drum, you know, bang the drum again and again and again and again, and inspire, enable, empower, and engage their teams to bang and bang and bang the drum again, to keep people connected to this kind of sense of shared purpose of the organization or maybe the team, which and notice that when people are going off track, getting caught up in their own stories, that, well, that's what human beings do. And maybe be able to bring a little bit of kindness, a little bit of compassion, a little bit of inquiry to what it is that is actually going on with this human being that may be just getting caught up in their own stuff and losing touch with the shared purpose that they've signed up to. So that's just another sort of basic element. So at the fundamental level, self-awareness incorporates awareness of others and their needs and how we impact on that. And knowing that our state of consciousness will automatically impact on everybody else. It just happens. Anything else? Hi, 𝘁. I've just noticed that you're here. I haven't seen you for a long time.
Yes, I am here. Good seeing you.
Hi. Anything you'd like to say about this topic? Because I guess you did train with us a long time ago, didn't you, or did you not? No. Yes, I can't remember.
Yeah, a long time ago. Yes,
Long
I just wanted to come on this session, and I'm coming a little bit late. I'm sorry, but it's all this self-awareness, self-management, and self-transformation. Obviously, great topics, and it's just good to listen to what you're sharing. Thank you.
So what is your take, Cyril, to very, very experienced coach as you are? What is your take on our take on this area of attention?
Yeah, I think this is a great map. And I came in when you were just about wrapping up the self-awareness part. And couldn't help thinking about the endless hours of sitting on the cushion and observing what's going on in the body and what's going on in the mind. And in terms of cultivating that self-awareness, I really love the fact that you talk about the remembering to remember, because how often it happens that we, in the heat of the moment, we forget. But then, like you said, remembering why is this important, and then the kind of the correction comes almost automatically when we kind of connect with the higher purpose, why we want to do that. And I guess once we do that often enough, the self-transformation start to happen. We might not probably notice it as we are going, but if we're able to zoom back, maybe we can see that, okay, I walked this path already, and I'm kind of progressed. That's my take.
Isn't it interesting? So thanks for sharing that, 𝘁𝘁. That it is about, so, you know, fun. We used to say in one of our brochures long ago that coaching is about helping people helping people to remember. It's like this double remembering. Because a lot of people, they know how they'd love to show up. They know already the way that they would like to be. But they just keep forgetting to bring that into a particular context when they've been triggered by some or another storyline that in the moment has powerful efficacy, you know, over them. And there's something really important in terms of the direction that they would like to bring to their lives. You know, I would like to be a kind and courageous and compassionate leader, let's say, right? And that's the direction that they would love to be in, but it's a long way away, and it's a direction, and it doesn't give immediate, there's no way you can have immediate gratification because there's nothing to achieve, there's nothing to get, it's just a direction to move in. And then something comes along. You know, you get triggered, and there's a sense of immediate gratification by removing the discomfort that trigger has created within you. And so you just react to that. And you forget how you want to show up, you know, what you've committed to yourself and to others about how you'd like to show up. And it really is, you're a mindfulness practitioner, 𝘁𝑚, aren't you? So you'll recognize that really this is a function of mindfulness. Basically, it's what it is. It's almost a definition of mindfulness. You know, what's the definition of mindfulness? Firstly, knowing what's in the mind and body in the moment, in the present moment, without an immediate reaction to it. Second, remembering what is skillful in that same moment. You can't do it in the same moment because you can't multitask, but we can bring it back to mind. What is you? If we can only put a space around what is happening in this moment to us, mind and body, then that implies that we have a moment of choice to remember what is useful to us, and we can insert our goals and our values into that moment. And then the third component is the ability to redirect our attention to what is skillful and simultaneously withdraw it away from what is not skillful in that same moment. So very, very, that's really what it is. It's what life is. Everything comes from that, doesn't it? Hi, Marion.
Hi, Tony.
Good to see you.
Hi, good. Good. I actually have a question.
You're live on Facebook.
I'm still alive. Can you see me? Can you see me?
I can. What's your question then, Marion?
Okay. So self-awareness and awareness of others, how to balance and how to choose. What I mean as a leader, to balance, I guess, okay, comes more like naturally, effortless kind of way but as a beginner, when you don't know yet how to choose to focus more on yourself or others, how do you start with?
That's a really quite an interesting question, and I think the way that I'd like to begin with this is really to bring our attention again and again and again to well, maybe the starting point is to ask this question: what are the most important roles that we would love to play in our lives? It's kind of like the first question. So, and of course, if you're in a context like in the executive world or the coaching world, then of course there will be contexts. But whatever the context is, how would you love to be able to show up in that particular context or in that particular role? You know, what would you like to bring to that role? And kind of there's that. Then, as part of that, then we ask perhaps the question: so, what values would I like? What values would I need to live by in order to be able to bring these things into this context? Right? Where values are focused on what I'm bringing rather than what I'm getting. right, into a particular context. You know, maybe I'd like to, you know, be kind. I'd like to be compassionate. I'd like to be courageous. I'd like to be resilient. You know, whatever it might be, and to sort of build a map of how you would like to show up in that particular context, especially when things are going wrong. So it might be perhaps that you know that there are certain troubling contexts where you're not feeling really good about the way that you showed up in a particular situation. Maybe you unintentionally, maybe you know that somebody, you weren't at your best in the context as a leader of being able to bring this other person to be at their best. And so it's always this continuous question. What is it that brings this other human being to be at their best? And sadly, most leaders are not really, well, they may be oriented to that. They may know that part of their job is to bring others to their best moment by moment. And that's, and that they need to do that in a certain way. But the way that it shows up in the moment is maybe through blaming or through, you know, various other somewhat unskillful, you know, being unkind, moving into a blamer mentality, getting agitated, screwing up your face, maybe rolling your eyes, you know, all sorts of things, without being aware, or maybe without being aware in the moment of the fact that this set of actions is not allowing this other person to bring their best to that particular moment. We know, of course, that in order to be at our best, we need to be in a state which is known as an approach state, right? I think you might remember that, Marion. Where approach state is where we feel unthreatened. You know, we a state of well-being is there. And in that state of well-being, we can collaborate, we can create, we can innovate, you know, we can have access to all of our resources that bring us to our best. To what extent are you as a leader embodying that, you know, embodying what is necessary to bring others around you to their best? How does that leave you in the context of your question?
Yeah, it shows me really how the frontier is actually very, very thin. And that's what actually inspired me the most, is to get to that point where I see that there is not much actually me and others in some ways, that this awareness become more like flowing, kind of in between. And that's very inspiring to me. But at the beginning, I can see how awareness of self and other is very also fundamental to really get that grounded first.
And it has to come, we would say that it starts from you. Without awareness of your own mental and physical state, mental emotional state, there's not really much chance that you're going to be able to connect with others' mental and emotional states. So even in the mindfulness world, you know, the traditional mindfulness world, we start with, you know, awareness of self, right? Mindfulness of self. But then as a consequence of mindfulness of self, mindfulness of others arises automatically. We're able to see into the mental and emotional state of others, and we're able to see into what they're going through, what stories might be running them, and how we might need to present ourselves in a way that brings that person to be at their best. It's a very, very interesting thing. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Thank you, Marion, by the way, for that. Yeah, it's interesting that we often will say things about how we would love to show up in a particular role. So if you go and ask 50 people what their values are, about half of them are going to say family as a word. Of course, it's not a value, it's a word. And then exploring that more deeply about what do they really mean by that, you know, so getting more deeply into the definition. If you ask the question, so if family is that important to you, then how would you like to show up in that role? What does that mean for you in the context of how you pour yourself into your role with your family? And they'll say things, you know, like be supportive, be a role model, be a mentor, be loving, you know, build a relationship, be kind, be compassionate, and they'll They'll tell you all of these things. And if you ask them, well, how are you actually doing? You know, how well are you playing that game on a scale of 0 to 10? And they'll often say, well, 5. Because they know that so much of their behavior is driven not by the values of how they would like to pour themselves into their role, not by that at all, but more about what we would call ego stories. Well, I'm only going to pour myself into my role like this as long as you do what I want you to do. And if you don't, then I'm going to get triggered, and then I'm going to behave in accordance with what the trigger wants rather than what I want, which is really to show up in a certain way. And then doing that undermines the very thing that we actually care about. That makes sense. And this happens in, obviously, not only in family relationships, but also in leadership. You know, how would you like to pour yourself into your role as a team leader or as a leader? And what is it that might get in the way of that? And you'll find that quite often it's when you get triggered. And we would argue that most of the time when you are triggered, it's fake news, the internal fake news. False appearances keeping us entrapped, entangled. And we can't break away from it easily without, time check. Thank you. So Lei has very kindly and privately given me a time check, 4:37. Actually, that's okay. I guess we should probably close. Any final comments, questions, objections?
Tony, as I was listening to your example on the values and the family and the behaviors, somehow the concept of competing commitments,
yeah,
the idea that came to me, and I was thinking that might be interesting to explore. You know, what are the competing commitments that this individual might have?
Isn't that interesting? Huh? You know, the competing commitments of the subconscious mind that we need to help people to become. Well, yes. Sometimes we need to help people to become consciously aware of that which is running them, you know, the goals that are running them in a particular moment.
Yes, yes, nice.
Which compete with the goals that they believe that they're, you know, we all believe that we have consciously held developmental goals, but they get hijacked again and again and again by the goals that we don't know that we have. The goal to be the cleverest person in the room, the goal to always be right. The goal to never be responsible for ever making a mistake. The goal to be loved all the time by everybody. Can't tolerate even a moment of the fact that I might need to upset someone from time to time, whatever it is. You see, you're talking about Robert Keegan, clearly. I recognize that you're obviously a Keegan advocate, as we are, of course, as well. So yeah, it's all of it. That's great. And Keegan's a behavioral psychologist, actually. It's interesting. When I met him, I spent time with him up there and certified through his Immunity to Change thing. And he's not interested in mindfulness at all, actually. He takes a cognitive behavioral approach to all of this. So it's interesting that there are different kind of ways of looking at it.
And somehow in my mind, they come together.
I mean, our hypothesis would be that without mindfulness, you actually can't make the changes. Even if you don't know you're being mindful, it is the faculty of mindfulness that allows you to notice what is happening in the moment before you've already taken the action. And so you're training that faculty, of course, is a very, very useful thing to be able to do to strengthen the Keegan stuff. Yeah, great, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to, Enko, why haven't I heard from you? Is it because you checked?
Hello.
Hi, Enko.
No, I'm here. Hi. We're listening to the conversations.
How's it going?
Good. I'm just conscious of time. Do we need to shut down soon, or? I'm
happy to shut down. I also, you know, I don't have such a relationship with time as most people do, so I'm okay to talk, but in service of being respectful to others' time, I'm very happy to shut down. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
And we'll hopefully be in touch.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you. Bye-bye.